The Valdrine warship Talon's Edge had seen countless battles across 3-star systems, but it had never encountered anything quite like Lyra Chun. She arrived aboard the vessel as part of the first human diplomatic exchange program, a gesture of goodwill between the newly contacted Terra and the Valdrine sovereignty. The Valdrine were apex predators, 7 feet of corded muscle, retractable claws, and eyes that could track movement in near-total darkness. Their reputation preceded them across the galaxy: ruthless hunters, fierce warriors, and protective parents whose cubs were kept far from outsiders until they reached maturity. Lyra was supposed to remain in the diplomatic quarters. She was supposed to observe protocols. She was supposed to keep a respectful distance from the crew's families. She lasted 3 days before curiosity led her to the observation deck during off hours, where she discovered she wasn't alone. 4 Valdrine cubs huddled behind a cargo container, their large luminous eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. The oldest couldn't have been more than 5 standard years, covered in the spotted fur patterns that would darken as they aged. They watched her with the absolute stillness their species was famous for, the kind that preceded either flight or attack. Lyra had been briefed about Valdrine cubs. They were precious, protected, and potentially dangerous even in play. Their instincts hadn't yet been tempered by socialization. She should have left immediately. Instead, she sat down cross-legged on the floor and pulled out her personal datapad. The cubs didn't move. Neither did she. For 20 minutes, they engaged in a silent standoff while Lyra scrolled through messages from home, occasionally glancing up to find those unblinking eyes still locked on her. Then her hair fell forward into her face. Without thinking, Lyra reached up and gathered the long dark strands, twisting them efficiently before pulling a ribbon from her pocket. It was simple blue fabric, worn soft from use. She tied it around the gathered hair, creating a loose bun that kept the strands away from her face. The cub's ears perked forward in perfect unison. The smallest one, Kiri, took 3 hesitant steps closer, then 3 more. The other cubs chittered in alarm, but Kiri seemed entranced, her small clawed hand reaching toward the ribbon. Lyra held perfectly still as tiny claws gently, carefully touched the fabric. Soft, Kiri whispered in heavily accented standard, one of the first words Valdrine cubs learned. Yes, Lyra agreed quietly. It keeps my hair tidy. Kiri's eyes, huge and golden in her young face, stared at the ribbon with an intensity that Lyra would later learn to recognize as the beginning of an obsession. The next morning, Lyra found a strip of reflective emergency tape carefully placed outside her quarters. It took her 3 hours to realize it was a gift. By evening, there were 2 more items: a length of medical gauze tied in a clumsy bow, and a section of someone's uniform belt, clearly chewed through rather than properly cut. The ship's quartermaster filed a complaint about missing supplies. The medical officer reported a break-in to the first aid station. Security footage showed 4 small shapes moving through ventilation shafts with military precision, emerging only to acquire specific targets, anything long, flexible, and remotely ribbon-like. Lyra watched the security chief's briefing with growing horror as the evidence mounted. Communication cables, decorative sashes, someone's ceremonial honor cord, strips of fabric from the commissary tablecloths, and an entire roll of tactical webbing had all vanished. Every single item appeared outside her quarters within hours. The cubs are showing nesting behavior, the ship's physician explained to the increasingly frustrated command staff. But they're nesting for someone outside their family unit. This is unprecedented, Commander Thask. A scarred veteran whose own cubs had reached adulthood decades ago studied the pile of stolen goods with an expression Lyra couldn't read. The human has imprinted them. I didn't mean to, Lyra started. They are predators, Thask interrupted, but his tone lacked anger. They watched you perform a grooming behavior. They witnessed you make yourself more efficient, more ready. In their instincts, they see a hunter preparing for action. They wish to assist this preparation. It is ... double quotes, he paused, searching for the word ... generous. They're stealing from everyone on the ship. Yes, to honor you. Thask's ears twitched in what Lyra had learned was amusement. They are demonstrating their skills as hunters and providers. You should be flattered. Most aliens never earn such regard from Valdrine cubs. The thefts continued for another week. Engineering lost 3 meters of fiber optic cable. The cook's prized collection of decorative twine disappeared entirely. Someone's silk prayer scarf vanished from the meditation chamber. Lyra found each item carefully arranged by her door, sometimes tied in elaborate knots, sometimes shredded into ribbon-width strips, always presented with obvious pride. She tried refusing them. The cubs looked devastated, their ears flattening in distress. Kiri made a sound Lyra had never heard before, a high-pitched keen that brought adult Valdrine running from 3 decks away. She tried hiding in her quarters. They left gifts in the ventilation grate. She tried explaining that stealing was wrong. Kiri tilted her head and offered Lyra a strip of what appeared to be the captain's personal banner. Finally, Lyra did the only thing she could think of. She went to the quartermaster and requested an official requisition of actual ribbons. Real ones, meant for hair, in multiple colors. The quartermaster, who had filed 17 separate theft reports, approved it with grateful haste. When Lyra sat down on the observation deck that evening, she had a small bag filled with proper ribbons. The cups materialized from the shadows within seconds, drawn by curiosity. She showed them how to braid, how to tie bows, how to create elaborate knots. She demonstrated different styles, different techniques, the entire vocabulary of human hair management passed down through generations. The cups watched with an intensity usually reserved for stalking prey. Then Kiri carefully, reverently, took a ribbon and tied it around her own small wrist. The other cubs followed suit, each selecting a color, each wearing their ribbon like a badge of honor. The theft stopped immediately. But every morning, Lyra found a new ribbon outside her door. This time properly requisitioned through official channels, signed for by increasingly exasperated adult Valdrine who couldn't deny their cubs' formal requests. And each ribbon came with a small note in carefully practiced standard script, for Lyra's hair. From Kiri. By the time the diplomatic exchange ended 3 months later, Lyra had enough ribbons to supply a small store. She had also become the unofficial cub tender for the entire ship, teaching youngsters from multiple family units about human grooming rituals, cultural practices, and the importance of asking before borrowing. The Valdrine command staff filed a formal request for her to return on a permanent basis. The cubs had found their pack member, and she, unexpectedly, had found hers. When Lyra left, Kiri pressed something into her hand. It was a ribbon, but unlike any other. Woven from strands of Kiri's own shed fur, mixed with threads of blue that matched Lyra's favorite color. "So you remember?" Kiri whispered. "So you come back." Lyra tied it in her hair before she reached the transport shuttle. She never took it out.